4, 3, 2, 1. We're live.
Good morning, everyone. This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission Advisory Review Panel convened to review FY24-25 Arts Organization Support Grant Program applications for Regions 6, 10, and 12. I'm Maya Michelson, Executive Director of the Indiana Arts Commission, and I'm serving as today's review panel moderator. Today is April 28th, 2023, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Central Time, and we're meeting online and streaming live for applicants and the public to observe. Just as a quick reminder, there is to be no contact between the panel and the audience about the disposition of applications before, during, or after the panel meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available upon request. Right now, I'm going to individually invite each of the panelists and then IAC staff and regional partners to introduce themselves. Panelists will state their name, occupation, and where they're from, and regional partners and staff will state their title and role. So we'll start with the panel. I'll introduce each of you by your first name so that you can share a bit about yourself, including where you're Zooming from today. We'll start with you, Rob.
Hi, my name is Rob Millard Mendez, and I'm a professor of art at the University of Southern Indiana, and I'm in Evansville, Indiana, and I'm Zooming from a jewelry lab because I'm teaching later on today, so.
Fantastic, thank you. Welcome, Rob. Next is Corey.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Corey Taylor. I am professor of English at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology, where I also serve as the associate head of my department of Humanities, Social Sciences, and the Arts. And I am coming to you live and on Zoom today from my home office in Terre, Haute.
Welcome, Corey. So glad you're with us. Next is Samantha.
Good morning. I'm Samantha Benty. By day, I'm a brain injury specialist for Easter Seals, and I'm also a community organizer and president of the Haney's Corner Arts District Association here in Evansville, which is where I'm Zooming from.
Great. You welcome, Samantha. Next is Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Lincourt, and I am a retired music teacher. I'm also active on the board of Tree County Players in beautiful Greensburg, Indiana, and I am broadcasting to you from beautiful Lake Santee.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kathy. Then we'll move to our regional arts partners. Sherry, Region 6.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sherry Wright, and I'm the program manager for this particular grant program representing Arts Indiana, and we are a regional partner with the Indiana Arts Commission for Region 6.
Thank you, Sherry. Next is Anne.
Good morning. I'm Ann McKim. I am the Executive Director of the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana down here in Evansville, and we are the regional arts partner for Region 10.
Thanks, Anne. And Alex.
Hi, my name is Alex Helton, and I'm the Regional Services Manager for the Madison Area Arts Alliance, the Region 12 Regional Arts Partner, and I am coming to you live from Madison, Indiana.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex. We've got a mighty team of 3 regional partners on this panel, so we are in good shape. From IAC staff, Terre.
Hi, I'm Terre Franco. I'm the Communications Manager, and I am here today to take notes.
Great. Thanks, Terre. And Eric.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Ashby. I'm the Grants and Research Manager for the Indiana Arts Commission, running all things IT and tech today.
Thanks, Eric. Now we'll begin the panel review. And for those watching the live stream, this is how the process is going to work this morning. The panel will discuss each application, and the assigned reader will provide a summary of their review before discussion moves to the full panel. Once the panel has completed their discussion, they'll have the opportunity to update their scores in the online grant management system. As the panel moderator, I'm encouraging them to be conversational in discussion, to feel free to ask questions of one another and chime in when they have thoughts to add. While we want to be mindful of time and focus on the highlights, I'm also here to ensure the discussion includes each of the 4 evaluation criteria which are organizational excellence, artistic quality, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, and community engagement. If for some reason one of our panelists has a conflict of interest with the application, they'll be placed in the waiting room until we're ready for the next application. We do not have any conflicts of interest on this panel, so that will not be happening this morning. Are there any questions from our panel before we get started? Okay, hearing none, let's begin. On the screen is the list of applications that will be reviewed today. They're in alphabetical order. Now we'll stop the screen share and start the discussion. Our first application is Art Spaces, Wabash Valley Outdoor Sculpture Collection. And Rob, you are the reader for that, so whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks for letting me start out here. I basically like to summarize some of the things I wrote in my comments, so I'll just touch on a few things here. It's a really ambitious organization with a lot of human power behind it. Number of board members and their committees and their activities are really impressive. To be as specific as possible, Part C of the response, the how does it operate section, I thought was really quite strong, exemplary. Moving on to idea, I thought this was a strong application in that area as well. I think part of what was asked for was what's an aspiration or something that you would like to do, and they talked about this QR audio description for people who can't see very well. I thought that was really a nice addition, a way to think of how to bring that to people who might have trouble enjoying the work otherwise. And as far as accessibility, for the most part, I think they showed a lot of thoughtfulness in this area. And as far as artistic quality score, I thought it was quite strong. They have a really great breadth of activities. The intentionality of their curriculum linked materials, I think, really helped with this. And the quality is brought up by the competitive RFQ process that sort of allows quality things to rise to the top. And their continuous improvement aspect, as far as like spaces in the city, I thought was really strong. And then community engagement, there's kind of a built-in community engagement with what they do, putting art in public spaces. They offer a lot of streams for community input, which I thought was really impressive. Putting a big object into someone's space where they often are, I think, requires that kind of two-way back and forth input. And they do these charrettes and debris sessions, which I thought were a good way to get really direct feedback. So those are all my comments having to do with art spaces.
Great, thanks, Rob. That's great. Great to kick us off. So I'll open it up to the full panel. Additional comments or observations on this application, and just unmute yourself and jump in.
Rob, I agreed with your assessment that so many of the artistic quality in particular and the way the organization is structured is very strong. I echo everything you said. My only other comment, I think, under artistic quality was that I would have really loved to have understood the process that they use to arrive at and execute each sculpture. Having 21 sculptures in one community is really impressive, and the level of collaboration with that artistic collaboration is significant. So I really would have loved to understand how they select the topic, how they select the artist, and how they, like you said, put this large object into someone else's space, how they decide how they're going to do that with what is very clear intentionality. So that would have been a benefit, I think, for me personally and for the application.
Okay, thanks, Samantha. Additional comments on this application? I'm scanning eyes. Looks like, all right. It looks like if there are no other comments, I will ask the panelists to take a moment or two to update scores in the online system for this application, and then we'll move on to the next one. Take your time. Okay, it looks like we're ready to move on. So our next application is the Children's Center for Dance Education. And Corey, you are the reader for this, so whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm glad to be talking about this proposal this morning. I thought this was a very well-written and detailed proposal from start to finish. I'll go through the criteria, kind of like Rob did, and just sort of mention some high-level things that I noted in the application. Under organizational excellence, I thought that it was very thoroughly described what the center does and how thoroughly it's integrated into the larger Evansville community. It talked very specifically about both its organizational structure and its plans. Idea initiatives were also mentioned under organizational excellence, and that discussion was obviously continued in the following section. Just a very high level of specificity and details. I was struck in particular in the idea section by the range of diversity and equity activities that the center does. A very clear operational philosophy along those lines in terms of the activities that it provides to the community. I thought in that section as well, the goal of recruiting more boys and young men to dance was quite good, and the goal of having more diversity in instructors was also quite nice, and of course adding accessibility was mentioned there as well. So just an excellent idea section to go along with the strong organizational excellence. Artistic excellence was also quite good. Everything from activities to instruction to costume maintenance was covered in detail. It's pretty clear that the center takes its work seriously and is passionate about it, which is always good to see. And in the final section on communication and assessment, they continue with a lot of really strong examples. My only suggestion there is to maybe talk a little bit more about quantitative data that the group is able to collect and utilize, along with the excellent qualitative data that it has there, and then the plans for continual improvement were also really well done. So those are my comments on the Center for Dance Education.
You, Corey. I'll open it up to the full panel. Additional comments or observations on this application?
I thought that the level of interaction with the community was very, very, very well done. It was quite evident in all their responses, the level of community engagement that they adhere to. And I think that's just marvelous.
Thanks, Kathy. Any other comments from the panel? Okay. All right. Sign of a thorough review. All right. If you would, take a minute or two to finalize your scores in the online system, and then we'll move on to the next application. It looks like we're ready to move on. Our next application is Clarksville Little Theater, and Samantha, you're the reader for that. So whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So the Clarksville Little Theater does a great job in this application of highlighting the ways in which they are important to their community. They have a really clear understanding of how that organization fits in with their 5-county region as the only small local theater provider. They also have a strong financial growth that they've shown over the last few years, and they seem pretty proud of that. And it was very clear that they've been working hard to increase their capacity to plan for and carry out programming, more of their long-term sustainability. Under the idea, there may be more specifics in action, but it would have been helpful to understand how the group is taking steps to address the outlined Hispanic involvement deficits and diversity that they mentioned. And also to find ways to express how they are going about encouraging a variety of people to participate. It's very evident that they're open to diversity. Looking at some more actionable items or identifying those, and it seems like they must be in place, but identifying those would have been helpful. They have some great efforts in reaching a variety of ages and a great intentionality in how they're selecting their the pieces that they're performing to make sure they are appropriate for the community that they're serving. And yeah, they had a lot of information in that area and some about those pieces, and I appreciated that. Under artistic quality, they had a lot of strong examples about how the artistic excellence is fostered within the organization, but I would have loved to have seen some more growth opportunities, and how they mentioned that artistic feedback is gathered, but how it was used, it wasn't necessarily mentioned. And again, some of this is maybe happening and probably is happening, but would love to see some more of that. For example, are outside artists brought in for instruction? They mentioned some of their education opportunities, but it was unclear in how that feedback was being used. The commitment to casting was extremely impressive. How they, and it's such an important point for a small community. It's clear that they've really thought that out and how they're going to cast within a community that, no pre-casting. I thought that was great. And the handbook that they mentioned, I thought was an excellent tool to maintain artistic quality standards. So that was a strong point. In community engagement, they are using self-evaluation, and it sounds like they're using it effectively. But it would be great to hear about other ways that they're using to measure impact. Let's see, and there is an obvious intent to work with other groups, but there were not a lot of outside partnerships that were mentioned in this particular section. It was very future focused. I would love to know more about how they're specifically putting those plans in place if there aren't partnerships existing right now, although I suspect there are partnerships existing that they maybe didn't highlight in this section.
Thank you, Samantha. Now we'll open it up to the full panel for additional comments on this application.
Yeah, I agree with Samantha's assessment of the proposal. Clearly, an important role, several important roles are played by the theater in Clarksville, and the thing that I noticed in this proposal was the need for some more concrete examples especially of our artistic quality in the artistic quality section and in the community engagement section. Like Samantha mentioned, that the organization does a great job of collecting information and using that to improve their offerings and their operations. But the sort of two-way relationship aspect of that proposal would have benefited from some more details.
Thank you, Corey. Additional comments on this application?
I have a really quick one. I want to echo what was already said, and I think this is something that perhaps could be a takeaway for all applicants, and that would be, you know what you do really well. I'm a person who doesn't know what you do really well, and many of our panelists are not from where you are, so I think specificity and concrete examples are really something that makes what you do much more vivid to us. So I think a couple of the responses they had in here were quite strong, but I would have liked to have just seen like more examples, like how you did it. I think would be a really helpful aspect for me.
Thank you, Rob.
I would have one comment on some of the people they were trying to focus on, and they recognized that there were problems in their area about children's mental health after COVID. but I did not see a specific program to address this, and I would have liked to have seen something along those lines for that particular concern, as it were.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Any additional comments on this application? Okay, I would ask you to take a few and finalize your scores in the online system. Okay, I think we're ready to move on, looks like. So our next application is the Community Theater of Clay County, and Kathy, you are the reader for that. So whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I was very impressed with Clay County Community Theater, as it's a very enthusiastic, focus-based organization. It understands its niche in the community and working to bring others under the umbrella of theater arts, not just to come together to do theater arts, but to join together in many other ways. I think financially it is striving to be affordable, even with the constraints of today's economy and setbacks that they've had from COVID. Under the heading of idea, I think Community Theater of Clay County has really concentrated on serving their particular demographic, the most underserved of these being lower income people, which I think a lot of us have. They are offering some free and scholarship-driven service for their younger members, and that only draws them in, but their families as well, and so thus growing the program over the long run. Admitting that you do struggle with some things in your community, like addiction, opens you up to finding solution. And I think I'd like to see a little bit more consideration of those with physical disabilities. You know, what is limiting people with that, you know, getting your services. Under artistic quality, I really admire the fact that this community theater has identified a pool of talent and realized that it can be limiting in itself. When encouraging growth, it strives to build on strengths, having older, more experienced members mentor the younger ones, and they can grow with that. And I really, really, really like this excellent idea to promote all of this by having a locally written show. You know, what better way to get a local artist, a writer, to produce a show and then have all these rest of these, you know, artists join in with that. I think the amount of workshops they do is a great idea. I might ask if they've ever considered any visiting artists to add to this pool. Then community engagement. When you are engaging with the community in specific, the gathering input can be both informal or more formal. I think they do a great job of collecting input by word of mouth, but I would kind of like to see a more formal survey type of input where you could actually generate some data that you have. You've got Facebook pages and websites, maybe generating something through social media. I do like the way they engage with the schools in a positive way. I don't think you can ever lose by partnering with schools in the community, and as well as partnering with other businesses.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. We'll open it up to the full panel for additional comments on this application.
Kathy, I agreed with so many of the points that you brought up. I'm kind of working backwards, but when you were talking about generating more formal feedback, I completely agreed with that. And I noted that this group has recently made some progress in what they identify as progress in technology, using an online ticketing system, using QR codes, and just thinking about how they might use those tools that they've already got kind of in their bag to start generating some data and feedback from those from patrons and also internally. The idea section was definitely, I think, an area of opportunity for this group. I agree with your assessment that they really took this question and looked at their specific community. I do think there is some risk in that because it can be limiting. They identified some areas of diversity that I hadn't considered, so I thought that was great. Like you mentioned, addiction let me try to make sure I'm very specific about this. And families, I thought those were really great ways to be thinking about the diversity within their community. But when they identified that their primary demographic of patrons are older and upper middle class, that is a stretch to go to other types of diversity. And so some actionable steps would have been, I think, are really important for this organization to consider if they haven't, but also be able to convey to us. But I was thinking in particular also of the types of diversity they might have within their organization, like within their casting and within the folks that are actually doing the performing. And that wasn't necessarily addressed fully for me in this application. But they do seem sensitive to a lot of those kinds of needs. I really liked under artistic quality how they talked about the limiting factors of their organization and just who's involved. I thought it was interesting that they, in some places, it felt like they were conflating value with skill. And I think that skill doesn't necessarily mean value. And it's clear that they're doing a lot. They're offering a lot to their community. So I hope they can see the value that they're bringing in terms of artistic value to their community.
Thanks, Samantha. Any other comments from this applicant? All right, we're good. Okay, hearing none, take a minute or two to finalize your scores in the online system. Everyone is ready, so we will move on to the next applicant, which is the Community Theater of Terre Haute. And Rob, you are the reader for that, so whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. This is a venerable organization in Terre Haute, a wonderful application on the whole, I thought. I think the clarity and directness and depth of their mission statement was really quite impressive. In the organizational excellence part, they had really strong material specificity, and depth of the narrative was really strong. And I think something I really liked about this was that they acknowledged the, quote, invisible characters that help make the theater work. So much is focused on what happens on stage, and I think kind of redirecting our attention to the other people, I think, was really a nice touch. As far as idea goes, I have a couple things. I think they did a good job addressing idea issues. The terminology change in their casting notices I thought was a really nice way of addressing like changing attitudes toward gender. I thought that was nice. And doing the board member training shows that they're trying to have a continuing dialogue with best practices. I thought that was quite good. and creating programs that address the needs that have come up, like the aging population of theater goers, and then they began this Oakley series. So they're sort of seeing their issues and addressing them with their programming, which I thought was really quite strong. As far as artistic quality, they answered the question really well. I think the way that they have this generational learning process, learning by doing, training the next group of skilled people who are going to come up behind you, I thought was really nice, and their multifaceted approach. One thing I thought the narrative might have been a bit stronger if it included more about the educational benefits on the audience side. So kind of balancing those two things, like, I think would have been a nice aspect to add to this, although it was strong. And community engagement, I was really impressed with how much they share with the community partners as far as their expertise, their materials. I think they did a really good job of making themselves really relevant and vital and a part of the community with the amount that they share. Their diverse board is excellent. Their social media angle of community input, I think, is great. And I think I might have liked to see a little bit about how that input impacts decision-making in a direct way. Several examples would have been nice as far as like how they choose their productions. But other than that, I thought it was quite strong. So that's all I had to say about that.
Thanks, Rob. Additional comments from the panel on this application?
I only want to briefly echo Rob's comments on how strong the IDEA section was in their acute and specific understanding of their strengths and challenges in this area and the specific steps they've taken to address some of the areas.
Fantastic. Thank you, Samantha.
I wanted to add that under, again, IDEA, which I agree, they are very strong in this area. For the underserved and people who are financially possibly unstable, I was very impressed with their Saturday ticket idea, in which they're going to offer discounted on Saturday. And that doesn't put any more preparation on the cast or anything else. It's a very, very good way to address that need in their community.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kathy. Any other comments by the panelists? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask you to take a couple of minutes to finalize your scores for this application. Okay, it looks like everyone is done. We will move on to the next applicant, which is the Covered Bridge Art Association. And Samantha, you are the reader for that, so whenever you're ready.
Sure. This application was just a really delightful to read. Delightful is maybe a silly word to use, but it is clear that the way that the organization conducts itself is integrated deeply into its community. That was highlighted in the organization section. They have a clear purpose and a clear mission and a clear dedication to art, and in particular art education in their community. They are really, I would say, doing a lot with a little here, and you can tell the enthusiasm that they have in this organization section. There are a lot of details provided about their financial section, but I would benefit from an overall understanding of maybe their big picture finances. They really got into some real details on some of this, and it was a very thorough application, but I would love to understand what their big picture financial situation is, and maybe some of the financial goals they have there. Under the idea, there are some aspects of diversity that they point out they just could not, that are kind of unaddressable for them given the demographics of their area. But I thought they took a really interesting approach to idea. I love the diversity in focusing on diversity in what kind of art they show. In particular, the taxidermy exhibit really struck me as a great way to bring in things that are less traditional art, but are clearly identifiable as art. Overall, I think the organization demonstrates a history of being flexible in its membership and focus, and who they serve and how they serve them. And they also seem to indicate a willingness to address other types of idea work. For example, I mentioned that already. So there is an actionable long-term plan addressed in the application that, when put into action, could help the organization achieve some of its idea work goals. But presently, it seems like there's not as much going on in idea as at least identified in the application. And I suspect, based on their taxidermy exhibit, they must be doing something else. Under artistic quality, the perspective of learning to teach indicated in the application was a really refreshing way to consider artistic quality. If there's not one, defining or clarifying expectations for instructors to ensure a consistent and streamlined improvement process may be an area of opportunity for the Covered Bridge folks. And under community engagement, a process for more formal community or member input is not necessarily outlined in the application, but there are several more casual modalities that they've explained. And then they have a lot of mutually beneficial partnerships that are explained in great detail. And the way that the organization is positioned in these partnerships assures me that they are a valued member of the community and considered a leader in the arts in that particular community.
Hey, thank you, Samantha. We'll open up the floor, the virtual floor, for any other comments from panelists.
I again concur with practically everything that Samantha just pointed out. Is a very strong application. And I think under what I liked in particular, just to sort of add to what Sam already said, under artistic quality, they talked about how their jurying process works. So there's sort of like a little bit of a gatekeeper function, which is good, I think, in this regard, because it helps to ensure a little bit of a higher quality. They also talked about how members of the organization can kind of work across different areas to sort of encourage sort of artistic cross-pollination, which I thought for such a small and rural organization was such a great thing to mention. And kind of keeping with that, the idea section was also good, and this was definitely the case in this application. And I think this comment's also applicable to sort of applicants, maybe not generally, but I think in some cases where you know, if your organization is not located in a particularly racially or ethnically diverse area, it's important to talk about that, first of all, and second of all, to talk about what you do to kind of foster idea principles and equity principles, regardless of that. And I thought that this application did that. The emphasis on youth audiences and scholarships was important. Accessibility for people with disabilities was also mentioned. And I would just also point out that in the application, they talk about how women were involved from the get-go in establishing this organization. So the diversity is sort of baked into the organization, despite the fact that there are challenges for addressing some other areas of that. So I just wanted to say how much I liked that in this application.
And taxidermy.
And taxidermy.
That's great.
I'm just so tickled by the taxidermy. I think that when we think about art kind of outside of the box, it's really refreshing. You know, they have these miniature exhibits, you know, the miniature sales and the taxidermy exhibits. I just was really impressed by how much they're doing and how in this application, there were themes that really flowed through, you know, through each section. It wasn't like artistic quality was specific to artistic quality. Artistic quality is clearly embedded in the idea work that they're doing and vice versa. And that was really a really great read.
Great discussion. Thanks to the panel for that. If there are no other comments, I'll ask you to take a minute or two to finalize your scores for this application. So it looks like we're ready to move on. So we will go to our next application, which is the Evansville African American Museum. And Corey, you are the reader for that. So whenever you're ready.
Okay. Again, I thought this was another very well-written and highly detailed application. Starting with organizational excellence, the proposal talks extensively about the programming and activities of the museum. They're detailed very clearly, as are its importance to not only the African American community in Evansville, but to Evansville overall. This first section also went into some good detail about the organization's fiscal standing, in particular, some of the challenges that are coming up for the next fiscal year. My only suggestion in that section, in that regard, is to maybe hear a little bit more about what the museum's plans are to overcome those fiscal challenges. But that's the only thing I could think to say in the first section. What I would like to see done a little bit better, because the organization is clearly well managed and important to the community and offers excellent high quality programming and activities. Moving on to the idea section, there's a very strong racial component of diversity in the application, but the application also does an outstanding job of talking about idea in very broad terms as well, noting that there have been activities done recently to kind of attract more audiences in the Evansville community to the museum. That included LGBTQIA+, Latinx, people with disabilities, and low-income families and groups as well. The free and cost-reduced events that they offer have been on the increase lately, so that is good. Talked about the need to sort of increase partnerships as well. There was a recent partnering with School Corporation in Evansville that will lead to other diversity opportunities. And again, a really, really strong section. One suggestion for the idea section would be to say, in addition to the need and the want to increase engagement with other groups in the Evansville community, a little bit of discussion about how to go about doing that, what some ideas for the future might be to further increase that. But again, a really strong idea section. In artistic quality and excellence, the discussion of the museum as a historical site and as an artifact itself, I thought was absolutely brilliant. Very, very well done. Very high levels of expertise and credentialing in the personnel there. So just really, really strong about the direction that the museum is going in artistically. I only wanted just a little bit more info about the various committees and their activities. Those were covered a little bit in the organizational excellence section, so it's really just a quibble there, but very, very strong. And then continuing with the community engagement section, extremely thorough and detailed. There are clear processes in place for the museum to gather information and use that information to improve what it is that they do. So the gather and analysis of evidence is strong, and there's a clear synergy between the needs of the community and how the museum is able to fulfill those needs. It's a very fruitful partnership. So just a really strong application from start to finish.
Thank you, Corey. We'll open it up to the full panel for additional comments.
I want to echo almost everything Corey said. I have one or two quick things to say, and that is in the community engagement area. A few partners are mentioned in earlier responses. I think to reiterate those here might be a way of saying, here's our partners and here's what we do with them. A little more specificity about the details of how they work with those partners and how they mutually benefit one another would have been really nice to read here. But on the whole, really strong and quite well written. So that's all I want.
Thanks, Rob.
I would like to give a comment about the artistic quality. I was very impressed by the curator. I think that is a very strong person to have on board. She seemed to really echo everything about this organization very precisely. Possible suggestion in this area, you are a museum, although not a arts museum, would a way to boost artistic quality to perhaps have a featured artist of color in among some of the exhibits, and enhancing your displays in that way.
Thank you, Kathy. Samantha.
Under the ideas section, in regards to the kind of intersectionality that was identified, a question that I had was, how is the organization working to make sure that those voices are amplified? The identification of that need was great and a great addition to the application, but I would love to understand more about how those pieces of intersectionality can be brought to the front. And then I did want to comment that I loved the multiple ways in which the organization is gathering input and how they are clearly valuing and utilizing that input. You know, there was mention of discussion at weekly meetings about, docent feedback or tour feedback. And I really love that they've made several avenues of providing feedback, but in particular, I liked the adding a sticky note to the photo. I thought that made the idea of leaving feedback easy and anonymous and really accessible. And also for an organization, it's very in your face and it's a very vulnerable thing to do because other people can see that. So I really commend them on their commitment to gathering and using feedback and being really vulnerable in that process.
Thank you, Samantha. Any other comments on this application? Okay, hearing none, take a minute or two to finalize your scores in the online system. Looks like we're ready to move on. So our next application is the Friends of the Ohio Theater, Inc. And Samantha, you are the reader for that. You're muted, friend.
You'd think that we'd be over this by now. So the organization, the mission is well defined, and I feel like the supporting information outlines its importance. There was some background information that I could have benefited from. There was a fire that was mentioned several times. Understanding how that fire impacted them in this section would have been beneficial for me to understand what exactly they were overcoming in that sense. The financial situation was defined as stable and seems, I'm not here to argue that, but there were some details that were unclear. For example, is the organization prepared to raise the $250,000 matching funds in order to receive the ready grants? So those are some questions I was left with. Under IDEA, externally, the organization seems to have a really, really strong handle on ways that it can implement IDEA work. Including how it works through its partnerships and how it identifies works to be sharing and works to be involved in. That was very, very thorough. The application indicates that they're approaching needs in both practical and innovative ways, and I thought that was really great. However, the application does not identify ways in which the organization could work more administratively to identify their IDEA goals internally. So I think that's an area of opportunity if it's not being addressed or if it is ensuring that information is shared. They seem to be really in touch with the demographics of their audience and the programming needs. Even though I don't think they necessarily specifically addressed that in this section, you can see that information in other areas of the application. Under artistic quality, the organization has indicated a willingness to stretch themselves outside of their comfort zone to provide a quality artistic experience, which I think is the mark of a really strong organization. The application provides several examples as well as ways that the audience is able to engage with the experiences. And in previous sections, they outlined other artistic offerings, but they weren't necessarily offered in this section. So I would have liked to have seen that brought into this area as well. And they may benefit from providing additional information about the selection process and ways that they're ensuring artistic quality within the organization. It's clear that the things that are being offered are of artistic value, but how they arrive at that is a little less clear. And then in community engagement, in previous sections, they had demonstrated a commitment to partnerships that were mutually beneficial, but they were minimally outlined in this particular section. And they definitely identified some methods of garnering input and a willingness to address those concerns, which is the next step, of course. But I think they may benefit from outlining the ways in which they more formally seek and utilize the feedback that they get both from attendees and also from within the organization. I thought they do a great job of really highlighting who they serve overall in the application, who they serve and how they serve them. I would love to know more about the people internally and who they are and how they serve them. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Samantha. So we'll open it up to the full panel for additional comments on this application.
I would like to reiterate some of the things that Samantha said, and I would say that on the whole, there needs to, be some definite direction. There have been a number of setbacks, and I think a list of priorities as far as what direction that they want to go to achieve. I think the commitment is there, and the drive is there to want to have a good arts organization supporting that. I just think under, some of the ways that we're doing, like under community engagement, how exactly do you want to engage with the community in certain areas? Networking and support of other organizations is a vital way to grow. And the specificity of those partnerships would be, very helpful to have for us being a knowledge of what they're trying to do.
Thank you, Kathy. Corey, looked like you wanted to jump in.
I agree completely with Kathy and Samantha. As I was reading this proposal, I kept thinking that could, right? Fire and then the pandemic and everything else. So this is clearly an organization that's growing, and I think the community engagement part is the part of the proposal I think that needs the most work. But I think that's also because this is a sort of up and coming, and again, an institution that's kind of being born for like the second or the third time. I think though that for the type of organization that it is, and for the community that it serves, it punches way above its weight. Like it does a lot in the community. I love the example in Artistic Excellence about the concert they offered pre-pandemic and then the concert that they offered post-pandemic. The post-pandemic concert was much bigger in terms of the attendance, in terms of the sort of musician they were able to attract. So I mean, I was kind of energized as I read this proposal, but like Kathy and Sam, I wanted to know more about how the theater moving forward was going to partner with the community in kind of mutually beneficial ways.
Fantastic. Thank you, Corey. Great discussion, everyone. Any additional comments? Okay. Hearing none, if you'd take a couple of minutes to finalize your scores in the online system. I'm muted. All right. Need to unmute myself. Looks like everyone has done that, and we are ready to move on to the next application, which is Harrison County Arts, Inc. And Kathy, you're the reader, so whenever you're ready.
Again, okay, I haven't muted myself. Okay, good. Harrison County Arts seems to be a very focus-driven arts organization with a unique place in the community. It highlights both the works of artists and arts education programs, both of which you need to support each other. It seems to be also financially stable at the time and looking forward to some growth, being financially supported for that growth. Under IDEA, this arts organization seems to have a very high level of competency. It is honest about its strengths and weaknesses. It realizes that though they have made some progress in the realm of IDEA, they need to be moving ahead and working on that. That's the first step in doing better, is they admit that. But they have said that their board is diverse and I would like to see them reach out a little bit more with IDEA. Besides the schools, are there other community organizations that you could partnership with to bring this concept of IDEA into your organization? Artistic quality. HCA offers a wide and varied range of artists and artistic endeavors. They seem to be well utilized are well versed in utilizing a variety of media to promote their goals. And in this section particularly, I very much like the way they have used specific examples of their program, like the Lantern workshop was one that it actually flowed through several of these sections as something that they can have as far as artistic endeavors, and they get these people to help in this way, and so I think that was very good. In community engagements, they seem to have a broad spectrum of community connections, but I was not as clear about feedback for their events that they've had throughout the community. How do you gather input in that sort of things? Now, I mean, one of their big steps forward is remodeling the building that they've just had since, I believe it just was since last May. Have they considered, a survey for the community of things that they'd like to see take place in this building, and how it could be utilized to grow that relationship with the community?
Great, thank you, Kathy. We'll open it up to the floor for additional comments. So jump in.
I shared a lot of the same perspectives as Kathy. Under the IDEA, I agree that there are strategies that are needed. I agree that they're honest about where they are. And I think they also need a way to better understand or explain to us the ways in which the communities that they've identified are more specifically lacking in that access. The understanding expressed here seems to be broad, but I don't think any organization is necessarily prepared to take on that level of broad challenges. So focusing on the more specific ways that they might be able to address that might be a good place to start for them. I completely agree about the artistic quality. There's just a huge, excellent variety of opportunities that are presented. And I had to keep reminding myself in this application that they've just experienced a major shift to having this physical space. So in some ways, they are a well-established organization, and in some ways, they are a brand new organization. And so I think there might be some not growing pains might be the best way to describe that, in bringing their newness experience to the level of function that they have at their core. The community engagement was a big area of opportunity from reading this application. They gave some great examples. This community connections is a great example of a starting point. But it seems like more targeted mutual benefits could have been identified if they exist, or if not, might be a great way to kind of bring that gap between the newness and the establishedness of the organization.
Hey, thank you, Samantha. Any other comments from panelists? Rob?
I had something really quick to say, and that is I want to commend all the panelists on the surgical precision with which they're using the instrument of the criteria to look at these applications. And I think, to bring it to a wider discussion just for a second, to all the applicants, see that, and when you're writing these, look at all the criteria, and people who put A and then categories and subcategories, that is something that I think is so important for us as panelists to look at, for applicants to know about. So I think there were some wonderful things here. I like the way that you jury the artists to keep the quality high. I think that's really awesome. And you're making moves towards getting feedback, like the Chamber of Commerce activity that you did. But I think that's something that, having done these for multiple years, comes up a lot. How do you get your feedback? How specific is it? Where does it come from? That's something that is an action item for all of these organizations to take on. And that's something that you can do with social media. It's not expensive to do a survey now, so to all of you, do that. And to this organization, I say the same, so.
Thanks, Rob. All right, good discussion, folks. Appreciate all the thoughtful comments. And to Rob's point, the surgical precision around the criteria, that's really important. For our applicants. Any other comments on this application? All right, hearing none, I'd ask you to take a couple of minutes and finalize your scores, if you would. Okay, it looks like we are good to move on. So our next application is Putnam County Coalition for Education and the Arts, DBA The Castle. And Rob, you're the reader on that, whenever you're ready.
Okay, some really great material in this response. I think the strong ideas and aspirations and the wide-ranging approach they take is amazing. I think they mentioned in the application that they've pivoted several times. And I think that as a reader, it might have been helpful for this organization to say, like, we do these 3 things, and kind of focus on those. Like, we have this film, and then we have, it seemed it was a little bit hard to follow for me. And I like that they talked about getting back to their original vision and how they were going to do that. I greatly respect this organization. I think one thing I think might have made it stronger as well is, like, they talk about these experiences in the classroom and what they're like, and the results of them, like that quote from one of the student teachers who had done it. But I think just 1 or 2 vivid anecdotes of exactly what happens in a boots on the ground activity would have made this really sing in a way that would have made it even more compelling than it was. So that's kind of my open. As far as idea goes, I thought they had great things to say. Bringing in experts who propound and work with idea values, I think, was really nice, especially in section B, highly detailed exemplary stuff in that section about the idea aspect. As far as artistic quality, I thought the response was strong, bringing in acclaimed individuals, highly respected people, authors, TED Talks. I thought that part was really strong. And a selective process moving forward will nurture that continued improvement. They were quite impressive there. And as far as community engagement, they mentioned several different means by which feedback is attained, and the fact that they've taken on new challenges in response to stakeholders shows that they're responsive to different community needs. And their number of partnerships and the way they explained them and the mutual beneficial aspects I thought were really well explained in this. So on the whole, strong. I think just that one or two anecdotes would have really put it over the top.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Other comments from panelists?
I found myself, to kind of Rob's point, lost a little bit in the buzzwords of this application. The content at its core was great. The effort it took to kind of sift through it was a big challenge. Some of that was maybe the enthusiasm that the writer has for the mission, which was very evident. There were a couple of things that I felt like were really challenging for me as a reader to assess. One was idea, because the Castle application clearly values and speaks highly of idea work, but largely this section was addressed in broader terms and concepts. And there wasn't really a focus on implementable strategies or concrete steps. And it doesn't mean that those steps don't exist, but there was clearly such an enthusiasm for idea and this praise of, a larger focus, a more cultural focus on thinking in the way that the Castle has been thinking for years. And I love that, but it still didn't tell me what exactly they've been doing or what they're doing now for idea work. And so I was left really with not a lot of information in that. It was pretty unclear. I do send lots of praise to anybody who is working to address the mental health and well-being of teachers. And I loved that focus. I think they have a clear passion for that. The ways in which they can engage the community around it was a little challenging for me to understand as well. They have partnership information identified kind of throughout the application, but exactly, there was so much of it, and it was so specific that it made it hard for me to kind of see, kind of like Rob said, what exactly the boots on the ground approach was for those organizations. And I have to believe as they grow that they have these pieces in place, but it was difficult for me to understand what the mutual impact might have been, or how those partnerships are affecting the people that they're intending to serve. I think there was maybe a disconnect between that. There's the people they want to serve, there's the people they want to partner with, and the in between was a little murkier.
That's great. Thank you, Samantha. Additional comments, Kathy?
I would just, reiterate what both Rob and Samantha has said. I feel like we've got this basket of things that are wonderful, or this stew that we're making. I'm not sure how to give a good analogy of it, but it needs to be boiled down into its essence so that we could digest it in a better way. I think is what, it's just got to get focused.
I'm always for a food analogy, Kathy, so thank you for that. Any other comments by the panel? All right. Hearing and seeing none, if you take a minute or two to finalize your online scores. It looks like we're good. So, question to you panelists, want to power through? We've got 5 more applications, or we can take a quick 5-minute break. I see a shrug. What do we think?
I'm fine to continue.
Is everybody good? All right. All right. Power. All right. Onward. Awesome. Thank you, guys. The next application is the Putnam County Playhouse. And Corey, you're the reader for that. So start when you're ready.
Okay, I left myself unmuted, so we are good to go. Putnam County Playhouse put together a very strong application, starting with organizational excellence, Everything here was very clearly articulated. Plenty of details about the organization's mission and how it informs their activities, their organizational structure, the work that committees do, the Playhouse's importance to the community, and particularly the fiscal discussion. I thought that this was that was an exemplary subsection of an already strong opening section. The sources of the Playhouse's monies, how the monies are applied, and what they need in the future. I thought that was particularly excellent. So a very clearly well-run organization with a clear sense of what they do and their value to the community. In the idea section, I thought that high level of specificity and high quality writing continued as well. Like I had mentioned earlier, this is an application that does well in the ideas section to note that their community is neither racially nor ethnically diverse, and yet they still make very effective strides at promoting idea in the community. Economically disadvantaged population is a big part of that. The organization also seems to take handicap accessibility seriously, as well as accommodating both youth audiences and elder audiences to get some age diversity in there as well. There's a great forward-looking element to the ideas section as well. Here are the things that we as a playhouse in this type of the community could do better. So I was really pleased to see that. So I would be curious to see how that develops in the future as the organization continues to reach out along the lines of idea. The artistic excellence section was also good. I do think that this section drew a bit on what was covered in the first section in terms of what the organization does. That is not necessarily a bad thing to reiterate the things that it does, but it's very clear that they're devoted to providing high quality programming, and that both the Playhouse and the community that it serves benefit from the really dedicated volunteers and board members, and of course having DePaul right there, and the faculty, staff, and students that help out with that as well, sort of contribute to the artistic quality. And since the Playhouse is so well established in Putnam County, as they write in that last section, very closely intertwined with the community, and how close the Playhouse is with the various entities mentioned in that section, was quite well done. Lots of examples there about how the theater provided young people with a space to belong. It is a unique entity in the community, providing that space for young people to express their talent and to find like-minded people and to build that sense of community is really, really important. The only critique I have, which doesn't even really rise to the level of a critique, is that I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about how the organization includes and discusses any quantitative data that might be relevant to community engagement, and how that data could be used to sort of improve the things that they do further. But overall, just really, really fine work.
Thank you, Corey. Additional comments from the panel? Kathy.
I would like to compliment them on, again, realizing that this is, their demographics are what they are. And when you're working with IDEA, you have to work within that frame of reference. But they are forward thinking, and they do have that as an utmost part in their minds. I also would like to compliment that on this is basically a summer season. And they are trying to accomplish the majority of this during 3, maybe 4 months that they are, I mean, they work year round, but that is when the most of their arts involvement comes. Along with the artistic quality, I'm a big proponent on getting visiting artists. When you've got a show that you're putting on, you need all kinds of artists or artistic focus. And maybe you had somebody who was a specialist from somewhere else in set design. This might be an opportunity to gain more artistic influence or exposure by inviting some people who from outside that have had, you'd be the guest set designer for one particular show. Otherwise, I agree with what the rest of Corey has said. As far as this panelist is, or these things are concerned.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Any other comments by panelists? All right. Hearing none, I'll ask you to take a minute or two to finalize scores. Like everyone is done updating, looks like. All right, we will move on to the Reed's Home Museum, and Kathy, you are the reader for that. So whenever you're ready.
We have all seen those houses that are older and maybe not as well kept. And we think somebody should turn this into a museum. And this is what this group has done. And it serves a very specific purpose in that area, that remembering and preserving. It serves as a public museum and a destination for field trips, which I think fulfills a very important need in communities. They've written a book about some of the experiences of people and how it's been affected. And I would just say their board is well established, but might have told us about some of the specific committees that you need in order to keep this preservation ongoing. Under IDEA, I think that they are on the right path as far as this is concerned. It's difficult to tell history from a different perspective once you've had it ingrained, but we need to do that as part of IDEA. Look at things from a different point of view, and that their narrative has been around so long. You want to be able to look at that with different light. Maybe utilizing some actors to help tell this story in a more time period type of way would be a way to do this. Also in this area, I was not clear on how accessible this facility was for those people with physical disabilities. So some more guidance there would be helpful. Artistic quality, I think they've given us some really good general standards here. We are looking for it. I would be interested in the specifics that you go through as far as adding a new piece to your collection or deciding a piece has outlived its purpose or doesn't quite fit. And where do these where do these pieces come from, and how do you get them? Also, how do you engage visitors to be inquisitive on the artworks and pieces that you have in the house? As far as community engagement, they have some they state that they have some verbal response from their board committee members. I'm interested in any written assessments or surveys that you do. And if they include any feedback from the general public in any way. I like the way they are working with the local schools. A museum such as this is a great place to go for field trips. And I was curious to if they ever have the docents go into the schools to prepare those students for the visits that are to come when you have these field trips.
Great. Thank you, Kathy, appreciate that. Additional comments from the panel?
I had a really quick one, and thanks, Kathy. I echo a lot of things you said. There's a part, I think many of the answers the institution sent to us in these responses were quite good. There is a part in the idea section, it's part A, and it's subsection C and D. I sound like a lawyer, sorry, but there's a part where it asks, like, what is a long-term idea thing that you might want to do? And then what would you have to do to accomplish that? Those are parts C and D, and they're not addressed at all. So I'm not trying to complain, but I think that it would have been really nice to read a response to those things. And that's something, it's a criterion that is here that I look for, and it's just not present. So like that is just, I think, an untapped possibility. It's an untapped opportunity for the folks who are writing this to say, this is what the ISC folks want to see, and here's how we're going to provide that for them. So that's my only comment. Otherwise, a good application.
Great, thanks, Rob.
Yeah, the definite strengths of the Rheims Museum proposal was the description of the organization and the artistic quality. Like those were easily the strongest sections of the proposal. And I just want to echo Rob and some of what I heard from Kathy too, that the remaining two sections on idea and community engagement they were incomplete to me. There were sub-points that weren't met, and some really missed opportunities to talk about future plans in terms of engaging with the community and toward increasing idea in what the museum does and how it operates. Certainly, it's good in the idea section that the proposal says that we want to cater to a more diverse community and audience. We've started to talk about some of the things that we offer in terms of the property and to highlight the diversity of like the people who worked there and were caretakers of the space before it was a museum. But those long-term idea goals related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, long-term strategies and changes that would need to happen are left unaddressed, and some specifics about the groups that the museum would want to reach being discussed there would have helped a great deal. And then under community engagement, I was hoping to see some synergy between the museum and its partners beyond the brief mention of lobbying for money, essentially. So while artistic quality and organizational excellence were both really strong with this proposal, community engagement and idea would benefit the most from some substantial changes.
Maya, may I jump in? So the museum is called the Rights Home Museum, and Maya did ask for clarification on that in the chat, and I was ignoring the chat and just absolutely focused on what you all have been saying and didn't see the number pop up. But it is the Rights Home Museum for any further discussion. Thanks, guys. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thanks. And my apologies to the folks at the Rights. I know better and just didn't get it right. So apologies, and thanks, Anne, for setting me straight. So if there are no other comments on this application, I'd ask you to finalize scores, if you would. All right, looks like we are done with that application, so we will move on. Our next application is Strings Inc. And Samantha, you are the reader there, so whenever you're ready.
Perfect, thank you. So the focus on rural stringed instrument instruction is very clear, and the mission for this organization, I think, is very well supported. The age range and the volume of students that are served with such a small staff is very, very impressive. The reach of this organization feels significant. I felt really comfortable with the information that they offered on their school partnerships. But I was less clear on their adult instruction and how that converts to the open concerts, festivals, etc. Just a little bit of missing linkage there for me. I would also love to understand a little bit more how the full tuition is the full tuition instruction is different from the in-school student programming and the after-school programming, and just clarification. Some of that comes down to they're doing, I think, so much that and I think there's probably a lot of overlap between those programs that I just could have used a little bit more clarification as an outsider. I'm sure it's very clear from the inside, but as an outsider, a little less, the organizational structure was a little less clear in that sense. In terms of idea, the way that Strings has approached the issue of access in rural communities is extremely thorough. However, the application does mention that their partnership with the Jasper Elementary School system brings a, quote, much more diverse population to be reached. But there wasn't a lot of identification as to what those diversity points might be and how they might specifically be being addressed. That doesn't mean, of course, that they're not being addressed, but just understanding as a reader what they might be doing would be helpful. Some things that I thought of that is, are the instructions being provided in paper form and online? Are the signups being provided in other languages? Looking at the area that they're serving, it's a large Hispanic population that might benefit from that. And then one thing that felt concerning to me and may not be, but might have benefited from some extra communication around that is the low number of conversions from their free school instruction to paid instruction. And I don't know if that's just because that instruction is so thorough in school that it doesn't, people don't feel the need to convert that to a more one-on-one. But I just wasn't sure. That feels low, but I don't necessarily understand the mechanics of that of those conversions. I also was looking at their provided website to get for supplemental information there, and I'm just wondering if the way that information is presented is intimidating based on how that was provided. Artistic quality, Strings has a very impressive, and in terms of sheer volume of education being offered. Obviously it's education focused, but I love that they integrate, although as I mentioned, I don't necessarily how, I love that they integrate the education aspects and community performance. So it's kind of serving a twofold purpose in that sense. It's bringing stringed instrument performance into a rural area and also providing the base education for that. I do continue to be a little unclear about the demographics served by the organization, age breakdown, numbers, more specifically. Obviously, they're numerous from the education from the elementary school partnership. The instructors seem qualified, and I absolutely sympathize with their difficulties in finding willing and capable staff. Again, I think they're infusing a lot of artistic value into this community with what they have. I do wish, going along with this is kind of where they addressed it, that they offered a little bit more information about their financial assistance for instructors to be seeking education. They mention it, but I don't know how that's offered or what instructors are actually accessing in terms of that continuing education or what they need to access in terms of additional education. In terms of community engagement, they are clearly well integrated into their community in terms of, again, their school partnerships and their community performing. I did feel like they have information that's being gathered. I'm not clear in how they're using it. And I do feel like a key group that is missing in terms of feedback gathering is the students, which can be difficult and intimidating to survey information from a group of elementary school students, but might be a really important piece of their engagement with their, with the group rather than for the group. And they have identified several significant relationships and have they're very clearly mutually beneficial. That pretty much sums it up.
Great. Thank you, Samantha. Additional comments from panel.
I had a tiny thing that I wanted to add about the artistic quality aspect. I think the fact that the organization funds the continuing education of the instructors was really a small point, but admirable, and it really shows a commitment to improvement, continuous improvement as defined by IAC.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Any other comments?
I had just a couple quick ones. One under artistic quality. Suzuki is a very specific method of curriculum, and I just was wondering if they ever used other compositions by different artists to perhaps expand their artistic quality and exposure of these students to other artists besides the specific Suzuki curriculum. And also with the scholarship aspect, this is kind of under idea and it's kind of under community engagement. I wasn't sure if business partnerships had really been explored to the depth that they could be. It seems like they have offered a limited number of scholarships and financial help for some of these students who are needy. So I would encourage, more looking into partnering with businesses as far as a form of sponsorship might be a way to go to help this very needed program.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Other comments? All right, if you would take a minute or two to finalize your scores for this one. Okay, it looks like we are ready to move to the next application, and that is the Terre Haute Community Band. And Rob, you are the reader for that one.
Great, thank you. So as far as organizational excellence, I thought it was a really well-written response, wide-ranging with a view towards big ideas and then also ideas that are smaller and much more concrete, like the importance of having a truck, which is an oft overlooked but very important aspect of moving around heavy stuff. The mental health tie-in that they put at the end I thought was really quite salient and important to our times, an important issue. So well written. As far as idea goes, I think the application covered a lot of ways that it's reached out to a great variety of people, so that was nice. One thing that they mentioned was as an impediment to their growth was the ability to read music. I thought maybe a suggestion of some kind of workshop or class or outreach program focused on that might be a way of just like building audience and building participation and getting buy-in from people. But on the whole, I think their idea of actions and aspirations I thought were quite good. As far as artistic quality, I think they did a good job as far as talking about the relevant expertise of the people who are in charge here. From a selection process standpoint, the organization seems pretty open to folks of all levels, which I thought was really a nice aspect. They covered their activities from an artistic standpoint quite well, and the people who attend the performances want to learn about music and see music. I thought that was nice. As far as community engagement, I think they did a pretty good job with this. Part B especially is very well developed. They nurtured a lot of strong partnerships with the community. I think the community input aspect is not as developed as Part B was, so I think collecting input from a relatively small number of concert attendees is a really good start. But that population is pretty small and self-selecting, so I think that part might be a bit stronger if the organization found some innovative ways to gather and act on input from a wider group of community members. On the whole, I think a pretty strong set of responses, though. So,
Thank you, Rob. Additional comments on this application? Yes, Kathy.
I think this is the first disagreement we've had. Disagree with Rob after having taught music for 34 years. Your comment that it would be nice to offer some sort of workshop to have people reach the goal of being able to read music. That would be something that could not take place unless they had a solid music background. If they were just refreshing themselves to go ahead and be able to participate in a community band, it would be good. But I don't think there would be time to do the level that's needed of already imagined ability. Having said that, I do agree it would be nice to have some sort of system that built in, besides the schools, to being able to perform at this level. Also, under organizational excellence, I was unclear. It said they are financially stable, but given that they didn't meet their goal for new advertisers and have not recovered all your contributors from pre-pandemic times, that was also stated. So I wasn't sure exactly how one went with the other as far as being financially stable, but not having reached the goals. That was very unclear to me. And I think that's it.
Kathy, I completely yield to your superior knowledge about music. So yes, your expertise is much greater than mine.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Rob. Any other comments? Samantha?
I thought that, again, what has been said, the artistic quality and the organizational excellence are very strong throughout this application. I felt like the idea section was a bit limited in terms of the information that was provided. There is definitely an understanding of the ability-based and the economic barriers that may be at play within the community, and a willingness to tackle those, which I appreciated. But there are some other areas of diversity or challenges that are mentioned that doesn't really have an outline plan to address them in any way. I understand that the applicant pool is limited in diversity, but sometimes, we've accepting something for what it is a barrier that we create for ourselves. And so looking at ways that recruitment might be happening otherwise, like, people seek organizations that reflect themselves. And so if your group is not being intentional about reflecting diversity, then you may not be attracting it, kind of passively. So it may be the case that there are not ways to recruit more diverse participants, but I don't think that we can come to that conclusion without looking first at what we're providing on our end as an organization. I didn't see an answer to item B in that, and so that might have helped if I had seen that. That's the benefit offered. How idea work has strengthened the organization. But I do think that overall in this section, they did a nice job of explaining the kinds of events that they host and how they do reach some of the diverse groups in their community that way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Samantha. So appreciate the discussion here. So thanks to the panelists. Any additional comments on this one? Otherwise, I'll ask you to finalize your scores, if you would. Okay, looks like everyone has done that. So we will move on to our next application, which is the Terre Haute Symphony Orchestra. And Corey, you're the reader.
Okay, so I thought the Terre Haute Symphony Association made their mission extremely clear in the opening section on organizational excellence. Highly detailed discussion of how everything the organization does and how it's structured fulfills that mission. I thought was quite well done. They're very detailed about their financial situation and how, of course, like pretty much everyone and everything across the country, the pandemic posed some challenges, but they seem to be in a very strong fiscal position even after the pandemic. So I thought that was a good thing to hear about, that the organization is on solid footing in that regard. So it's a strong opening section. The ideas section rested a lot on how the orchestra has expanded to or will be expanding to all 4 of the colleges that are here in Terre Haute, in addition to the fact that the 4th graders in the Vigo County School Corporation already attend concerts and workshops as well. So those educational outreach initiatives that are current, ongoing, and developing are all great things to mention here, and also making the symphony and symphonic music accessible to families from different financial backgrounds. I think that was also good. In the idea section, the organization also did well to talk about the ongoing challenges with diversifying their board and in terms of who they serve in the community. So those are some very worthy goals to expand beyond economics, age, and geographic location, which are the things that were talked about there. My only suggestion is that I wish this section were a little more detailed in about what that might look like, what steps can be taken, and if any changes need to be made to the organization's operations to help meet those idea goals. But overall, a really excellent section there as well. The artistic quality was extremely high, superbly written section, lots of details about what the organization does. So and again, in the first section, they included their schedule of shows. So already from the get-go, there was a sense that the symphony is dedicated to very high artistic quality. And I like in the artistic quality section as well the inclusion of a little bit of evidence at music's ability to change educational and life outcomes for young people. So thought that was a nice touch there. And then the closing section on community engagement was also strong, largely because there were so many examples that they provided for how they serve the community and how the community is also able to serve them. My only suggestion there is I would like to hear more about what types of data are collected and how they get analyzed to improve the organization's functioning. But overall, just an outstanding application.
Okay. Thank you, Corey. Additional comments from the panel on this application?
I did note the same feedback as you, Corey, on the way in which information is gathered was unclear, and so that made it a little bit hard to determine. As we've given feedback to all day about making sure there are ways to receive feedback that are as unbiased as possible. I appreciated in this application that they had. They clearly brought in different members of their organization who had expertise in those areas to complete them, and that made it a really thorough application. And I agree with you that I really appreciated their the way that they engage in the community around them. So there was a thought that has been gone now.
Samantha, that's okay. It looked like Kathy wanted to say something, and maybe it'll come back to you.
Rescue me.
Okay, well, I will jump in. First of all, I think this was an exemplary application. I was really just very awestruck at the detail in this. Under IDEA, which is something we are struggling with, and that we want to promote, they've identified weaknesses with which they want to work. Maybe less specificity on how you will recruit the people in order to create more diversity or programs that will, get this accomplished. And in that same line, it would be nice to have some clarity on the demographics of the audiences currently being served, and what do you hope that they will be in the future? What are you looking forward to? Otherwise, great application.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on this one? All right, hearing none, I will ask you to finalize your scores if you would. All right, it looks like you are done. I want to thank the panel today for their review, the review work they've done in advance of today's discussion and the discussion today. Really appreciate the time and effort that you have put in to review the criteria and discuss these applications. So this concludes the FY24 Arts Organization Support Advisory Review Panel. Applicants will be notified the status of their grant following the June IAC quarterly business meeting. If you have any questions about this process, please contact your regional arts partner. Thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care.